Hello, I'm Judy Woodruff. The pace and the direction of the economic recovery in the United States is uncertain, and a debate is raging over what's holding it back and what needs to be done to get the economy growing strongly again. Weighing in at this critical moment, Alan Greenspan. After serving almost 20 years as chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, he remains one of the most influential voices in economic policy. He left the Fed in 2006 and has been vocal about both the roots of the global financial crisis and the steps he feels are needed to emerge from it. I sat down with Dr. Greenspan at his offices here in Washington. We talked about the economy, financial reform, and his legacy. Dr. Alan Greenspan, thank you for talking with us.
It's my pleasure.
Fresh evidence this week of a slowdown in the economic recovery. You've said recently that you think this is a typical pause. When do you think the economy is going to start strongly going again? What's it going to take?
Well, let me add to that, because I also said in a quasi-qualification that we have just been through, and indeed is still in the throes of, the greatest financial crisis globally ever. We have never seen a shutdown in the availability of short-term credit of the extent to which that occurred around the world following the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers in September 2008. So this is a different world. I nonetheless do conclude, on the basis of all the balance of the evidence, that what we're going through now is the typical pause that usually is associated with recovery. But this is not going to be a full-blown recovery.
So what do you think the GDP is going to be this year and next year?
Well, it's going to be slow. The second quarter, which looked to be in April, a fairly robust, now looks to be down at 2.5% growth rate. And we haven't yet got all of the figures for the month of June. We're estimating and guessing at certain of these numbers. There's no evidence that there is a big pickup coming, but there's also no evidence of an actual double dip. So I think it is sluggish. We should be in the area maybe of 3% growth for the rest of this year after we come out of this temporary slump.
And what do you think the jobless rate, which is now 9.5%, is going to be a year from now?
It will be lower, but not all that much lower. The strange fact about this is that what has kept part of the reason why the unemployment rate has stayed high as the economy has come back is there was an extraordinary amount of squeeze going on in the corporate sector. Having, as is invariably the case, a major expansion of output, they weren't looking at their cost structure. They are now, and they've squeezed it down to the point where probably it can't go much lower.
So how long before we get back to even 6.5, 7% unemployment?
That's not this year and probably not next.
Befitting a central banker, you've long expressed concern about deficits. They are bigger now than ever before. Everybody seems to be worried about the long-term deficit issue. But in the short term, there is a debate about whether something should be done right now. The chief economist for Goldman Sachs, Jan Hatzius, for one, is saying the economy clearly needs a boost now from a government stimulus. Is he wrong?
No, he's not wrong, but it's less conclusive than he stipulates. The reason is we don't really know the full impact of government stimulus. We can estimate the number of dollars of GDP which are created by certain government expenditures because they're part of our actual GDP. And we probably could measure to a certain extent the gross additions to jobs from that.
Would that argue then for a government stimulus now?
No, it would not, largely because of the fact that the argument goes, and it's again difficult to prove, that one of the reasons why there is such uncertainty and risk aversion in the business community is fearful of the inability on their part to judge what actions are coming next, and uncertainty is the death knell of capital markets.
And you're saying government intervention, government spending would be uncertainty?
It's the size of government. It's the issue of the fact that an ever-increasing part of the American economy in the last year or so has moved under the aegis of government. And because it is very difficult to forecast what the actions of government is going to be, that creates an attitude on the part of the business community which is retrenchment, and you can see it everywhere.
Is the United States more likely, Dr. Greenspan, to experience a debt crisis like what Greece has gone through, or a slow growth deflationary crisis like what we see Japan experience?
It's going to depend very much on what we do from here. There is a growing political set of pressures to come to grips with the deficit. I think it's going to be far more difficult than anybody imagines. We are in a state of years, a decade, of major increases in federal spending and major tax cuts, none of which are other than with borrowed money.